The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Joanne Mercier. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Dom. Hi, everybody.
So I'm tempted to rename this The Secrets of Technology and Coronavirus because so much of the technology news today rotates around the virus, and it's just the way it is these days. But that's why our two segments are about the virus, our main two segments today, but at least in a way. And but the important technology questions come up that I think the audience, you, the listener, want to know about. You tell us that these things are important for you to hear about, and so we want to talk about it for you and on your behalf and kind of hash out what's going on. And today the first segment is this continuing question of privacy versus safety. We've got pundits on both sides, and we've talked about this a few times in the last few weeks about so we've got to balance our privacy from our technology versus fighting the virus. And part of the fight against the virus is getting information about who's sick, who's been in contact with others, and a lot of this data is acquired through, most easily and most accurately by using technology that could compromise our privacy. So the first article I want to mention that's related to this is this in Fast Company. It's an op-ed by a former White House in the Bush administration director of information, IT, in charge of IT for the White House, Teresa Payton. And so, what do you guys think? First, are you familiar with the topic of this debate, this back and forth between privacy and safety?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is something that we've just been discussing for a long time. I mean, we've been discussing this, long before 9/11, as we started to notice how we can be tracked. Of course, there's shows of, person of interest, where that's basically the whole plot is that he's able to use all this technology that's available to be tracked, for the computer to the master server to track people and figure out who might be at risk. Yeah. And it's interesting when it's a great TV show with Jim Caviezel and lots of action and fun. It's something very different when it's your daily life.
Right. And, when we're the ones who
one
can be
thing
tracked.
we as one thing we as Americans, we take privacy seriously. I mean, it very much is something that is kind of a part of our DNA as Americans is, the government can only go so far. Private industry can only go so far. There's a point where it's like, no, this is personal, this is private. And whether, unless there's a reason to do it, you need to stay out.
There is that actually. And before I mentioned Teresa Payton's article, I want to get into it, but I do want to talk about that for a second, because there is a very unique American mindset that a lot of our friends and allies in other democratic societies that are not totalitarian, but they think we're a little too crazy about this privacy question. In the UK, they're a little more relaxed on this. For years they've had this closed circuit TVs everywhere where watch the watch for crime and all that sort of thing. And that's been part of the DNA there. In other countries, throughout Europe and in other democratic countries, South Korea I think is the one, and Japan, they have a lot more police oversight, government oversight into the daily lives, more than Americans would be, whether they'd be comfortable with or whether they would freak out over. And I wonder, are we right to do that? I mean, are we overreacting in that regard?
I guess I'm on the other side of this. I look at it this way. I'm all for privacy, but I sometimes feel that the greater good is served by having a little bit more information. As far as we tend as Americans to want to be so private that we don't want to give up anything. Whereas, for example, if there's an app that can, go back through your contact tracing and say where you've been and let people know if you have the if you do have the virus, that they need to know about it, I think that's okay. I mean, I think that's a good use. It depends on the use of it. I think all of us read 1984 when we were growing up. So I think a lot of us don't want to see that big brother totalitarian state. But I think it's also paralyzing us because we're not allowing the good part of what technology can do, especially in this pandemic, to, to let it be grown and see. And it just means that somebody's got to have a moral compass when it comes to saying, no, that's not acceptable. We can't go that far. And I think in this country, we do have a problem with the moral compass in some respects, because we take the, a freedom that we have and say, I can do whatever I want, so there's a balance issue, right, or imbalance.
I think the question is where does that line get drawn? And some people want to push the line further away. Some people want to draw it closer in. And I think that's really where the debate is. I think most people, now obviously there's always going to be people on the fringe who are for, open everything or closed everything. But I think for the majority of people, it's just they're like, okay, yes, we can use technology to help solve the problem, but where do we draw that line on how much of our privacy we protect? Teresa Payton's op-ed, she kind of lays out some of the, post 9/11, we gave up some of our freedoms, we passed the Patriot Act. Some people cautioned that's giving government a lot more ability to do things than some of us are comfortable with, whether on the left or the right. And some people say that concern has been borne out in the past 20 years. And then she lists some of the not just even China and Russia, where you expect sort of totalitarian actions in their fight against the virus, but other places like South Korea, which is, tracking people with, thermal cameras at train stations to track people's body temperature. In Israel, they're tracking citizens' telecommunications data to monitor infections. India is using geofencing, which means where when a phone leaves a particular area, it marks it so that it can penalize people for going into areas they shouldn't go. UK is using drones to spot people violating social distancing, so on and so forth. And she's saying that could happen here if we're not careful. And then the question is it doesn't matter if it happens here.
Yeah. Well, it's I think one thing that's kind of interesting, I was thinking about this, is Europe actually has far more stringent data protection laws than the U.S. does. Yes. And of course, they poke us in the eye and it's like, keep poking us. You don't have these laws. We do. You don't have these. You're so concerned about privacy. Well, now they're pushing those laws out of the way so that they can use that information. Right. And the governments are very blatant about it. They're just flat out, no, we're going to be following your cell phone. We're going to be watching your online activity. We're going to be, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And it's always that balance of, there's such a concern about what government can and will do with this data. Because I'm sorry. And I think this kind of comes down to why a lot of Americans are afraid of the government having access to a lot of this data is what's going to say they're going to let that go when the emergency is gone.
Right.
Like it or not, our government has the ability to extend emergencies, quote unquote, or issues far longer than they really need to see our almost constant state of war. It seems like we're in.
Right. In fact, this is one of the things people use against the Patriot Act, which is certain provisions of the Patriot Act are sometimes used for things that have nothing to do with terrorism, like some of the seizure laws and some of the local police departments, small town police departments spending tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars on anti-terrorism equipment funded by the Homeland Security that is then used for harsh policing measures, using SWAT-like tactics on regular, everyday criminal matters. And this is the sort of thing that gets people concerned. I note, by the way, the European data protection laws are mainly aimed at corporations. They do restrict government a little bit, but they're not really about restricting government use. And that's a big difference here.
Again, I think that's where a moral compass comes in. If you enact something like the Patriot Act for a certain amount of time, somebody should have looked at that afterward and said, okay, here are things that we do need. Here are things that we don't need anymore. Let's make those secure again and just move on with the things that we do. But no, people just keep moving on to the next and next and next, and they keep leaving that stuff behind for unscrupulous folks to take up and use at their own peril or will or whatever. It's the moral compass.
Right. So one of the things that that was said in one of the articles, this guy who's in Toronto says that most of the measures being implemented around the world, not just in the U.S., don't have sunset clauses. Don't have clauses that say, this ends after a certain point unless it's renewed. So that at least there's a debate that has to happen. Even the Patriot Act had a sunset clause where it has to be renewed periodically. This is, as he says, could establish what many people are describing as a new normal. This sort of policing, this sort of oversight could be a new normal.
Well, and there's concerns about how they're responding to protests right now. I mean, in the last week or so, we've had a couple of protests in states where people were arrested for protesting in their cars.
Right.
They weren't even like out on. Now, I got some problems with, they had a protest in Montana and Helen. I've got some problems because they just completely went out and they're out in the park across the street from the state capitol, and there's no attempt at social distancing. Sure. And I've got problems with that. I mean, let's at least try, if we're going to protest, at least let's try to follow some of the rules, because Montana's pretty lax. But there's concerns that if they're doing this now as far as protesting and have the technology to track who the protesters are, that this could be used in the future for other reasons and other protests. Again, because there's no sunset to it. There's no time saying once all the COVID-19 related restrictions are lifted, this act is no longer in effect.
Right.
None of them say anything like that, which gives the government permanent ability to do this stuff whenever they feel necessary.
Now, one thing to keep in mind with regard to these various pundits out there is sometimes they don't always have a good grasp of the things they're talking about or objecting to. For instance, a couple of the ones that we're going to link to in our show notes, they don't seem to really understand what it is that Apple and Google are working on. So, for example, like this one pundit says, will Apple and Google give up the data that they're taking if they can monetize it? Well, Apple has a good track record, so I'm not worried about Apple. But she says, we need to I'm trying to think. We need to have tokenized and anonymized use of data. We need to make sure they do that. Well, that's already something that's in the proposal. That's what Apple and Google are doing. Is that it's baked into it is the anonymity of it. Or she says a built-in digital destruction policy. And the other one says, Apple and Google are making apps. Well, no, as we mentioned last time, they're not making apps. They're making the hooks for apps in the system. Right.
The APIs.
Yeah.
Right. The thing is that she doesn't, the person who said about not knowing about the having token stuff and privacy, sounds like she's an Android user, because if she was an Apple user, she would hear constantly how much Apple keeps our privacy and the great lengths that they go to. And then
let's be honest. The average Apple user has no more clue about Apple's security policies than anybody else.
But this person who wrote this is not an average Apple user. This person is a high-tech executive and former high government official in information security. She probably should know this. To be fair. Right.
Yeah. And again, there are a lot of Android users who are just normal, regular people and not techies like us, who never update their Android system. So it leaves them vulnerable to a lot of things, and no one ever explains that to them. So whereas Apple keeps pushing stuff through.
Well, I don't want to make this into an Apple versus Google thing.
I know.
The main point is that the people talking about this, we have to be careful that they know what they're talking about, and that when they are opinionated about it, that they've got the actual information that these companies before. They're not pushing some other agenda. And that's important as consumers of information and as regular users. We need to be informed. We need to be checking out articles. We need to get to the data I mean, this is one of the reasons why we do what we do, is to help people be informed.
Yeah, don't assume that just because she was a high-ranking information security person means she actually knows what she's talking about. Because having worked in the government and worked in IT in the government, yeah, they might know one little area, but it doesn't mean they know it all. So
I'll agree with you.
Yeah, I mean that's true enough. As far as it goes, there are plenty of government officials who don't know what they're talking about, got their jobs for whatever reason. Yep. There's another article, a CNN piece with a guy who takes sort of the opposite side or the other side. This guy's an infectious disease epidemiologist. He's not a tech guy, but he's going from the point of view like we need to sacrifice some of our privacy for our safety, and kind of outlines some of the. He looks approvingly at the ways that Israel and Singapore and Korea are. I don't want to say compromising privacy. That sounds so pejorative or biased, but they're balancing safety versus privacy. That's what I want to say. And so he comes up with some ideas. He thinks that the federal government should use the wireless emergency alert system to anonymously survey all Americans through their phones, which leaves me going, if you start using that system for things like surveys, people are going to start ignoring it. And that's going to compromise that system. And frankly, does anyone really believe that the government surveys are going to be really anonymous? I don't know that people really think they would be. Like if I answer, yes, I am, or no, I'm not practicing social distancing, or yes, I have been coughing with a fever in the last 5 days, I think a lot of people would be like, I'm not sure I want to answer this one way or the other because I'm afraid of the repercussions. So it just seems a bit naive, some of these proposals. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
some of that.
Well, it's again, the emergency alert system is an emergency alert system. It is to alert people to an emergency. That's why they use it for things like the
Amber Alert.
Amber Alert, yes. You know, things like that, where it's something where we need eyes on this, out for this vehicle now.
Right.
It's not, hey, so are you feeling okay?
Right.
Click yes or no. I mean, I don't even know if the phones are even set up for that, where it can respond back through that. So that means they have to completely redevelop how the EAS system works to do this.
In fact,
to begin with,
it's probably would send a link out, and then you'd have to click the link and go to a web page or something. Is my guess is how it would have to work. But as we saw, even with the Amber Alerts, for a while there in the beginning, the alerts were for a very broad area. Like I remember getting an alert for an Amber Alert in Pennsylvania once, which is I'm in the Boston area, and people really freaked out. Like, look, if we don't narrow this down, people are going to start to ignore these, and they're going to become useless. And I think that's part of the worry. Another thing he proposes is having insurance providers or healthcare providers offering incentives to share your data about your contacts, do contact tracing or your illnesses. But how quickly does incentive turn into requirement? Sometimes incentives can just be a nice face on. If you don't do this, you're going to lose your health care, even perhaps. That would be an extreme case, but that's a little worrisome.
I don't know about your states, but from the beginning of this pandemic, our governor in Rhode Island asked us to keep a contact tracing notebook, whether it's on paper, whether it's electronically. And I know from the experience of a friend of mine who is COVID-19 positive, that when she got it, they immediately call you from the Department of Health, and they start asking you all kinds of questions. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if an app would be better. I think it might, but I think even if for your brain to work, if you're sitting down every day and saying, here are my contacts, and then able to hand that over to somebody when they absolutely need it, I think that will do the job as well.
I don't know that it does the job as well. We're not doing that. There's been no mention of that in Massachusetts, but it works well for the people that you're in contact with, people whose name But the Bluetooth contact tracing that Apple and Google are working on would work for people you just have incidental contact with at stores or on the street. Like if you become within a certain range of them, I don't know the name of the person standing in front of me and behind me at the supermarket, but if one of them has the virus and coughed on me, I'd kind of like to know, and this is a way. So in that sense, I'm in favor of this contact tracing initiative by Apple and Google. I would turn it on my phone if it were available, based on the parameters that they've given, the privacy parameters, right. and if that's how it works out. But I'm not sure if I want my insurance company to be forcing me, even just through pressure, to do it. That's another thing.
And insurance companies, people bring up the legitimate concern that if the insurance company finds out that, yes, you might have this, gee, why did my rates go up?
Well, they're going to find out you have it if you go to the doctor anyway. I mean, that's the. Yeah. I mean, there's no helping that. They're going to know you have it if you have it. But
I mean, it's just that's kind of always this concern. It's the same thing with auto insurance and their little tracking tools that they have available now. Same kind of idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've looked at the data that Google has been putting out for about a month now, but they've been putting out where you can see by county what the trends are as far as people going out to eat, people going to, different sporting places and stuff like that. Are people staying home more? Are they and it is very much anonymized. It's by like a county level information, at least here in the United States. And it's very, this is all they're kind of extending is this idea of we're not going to let, there's not going to be any names attached. The advantage, though, of course, with this Bluetooth tracking thing is that it's only if there's an actual case, right? Where then they can go through and say, okay, this Bluetooth, and it as I understand it, it's basically this Bluetooth device was in your presence, which is associated with this person. So if they have to actually go in and find the device, and then who's the person attached to it. It's
somewhat complicated. We kind of went over it in detail last week, but there is this. Yeah, you get a daily tracking ID and that is attached to your device, and then every 15 minutes a new location tracking ID, and then when there's a positive notification, those things get matched up in an anonymizing way so that you get notified if necessary. There's more detail to it, but yeah, it's like that. It protects everyone. One of the things, like with your concern with the health insurance, is it's not so much if you get sick, but what if they know that you're around other people who are not even just sick, but kind of not engaging in the best practices for social distancing? Will you be penalized? And that sort of thing. That's what I worry about too. Is that sort of data being used against you? And if they do it that way, that's going to encourage people not to participate and not to provide the data and we need high participation rates for these things to work, for the contact tracing, for instance. One thing that came up recently that people may have seen was that, France is complaining that Apple wasn't cooperating, that Apple's Bluetooth restrictions are preventing the app that the government of France wants to put out, is preventing them from doing it. Well, the reason why is the French app wants to be in the foreground at all times running. When you're not even using your phone, which Apple says and they're correct, is a huge, it'll drain your battery like in an hour, like your battery will be dead. And it's a huge security hole because your phone is unlocked and would have to be unlocked and open all the time. Oh yeah, that ain't
that's
happening.
Not good.
I mean, it's bad enough when, like I think Apple does it too now, where you can set your GPS settings for each app as all the time or only when the device is open.
Right.
And it's there's no way I would put an app on my phone that's like, not just can get GPS the whole time. It's like, no, it has control of your phone the whole time, every day. Yeah. You know where my phone's going to sit if that happens? On its charger in my bedroom. Right.
So, this is part of the problem is when politicians are making technology decisions, they just seem to think that technology is magic, and if we just say it has to do this, then the techies can just figure it out. Well, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't. Yep. So no. So the bottom line is like one of the people in the article says, we've got to what is it? Oh, the first one, Teresa Payton. She says citizens with those, especially those with tech and cybersecurity expertise, need to follow the developments closely. Someone needs to be able to blow the whistle and throw the flag in the midst of all the clamor about fighting disease, we need to be paying attention. It's really the bottom line. Pay attention and be vocal about it if you, with your elected officials, if you see things going off the rails or not protecting us one way or the other. And I think that's really a bottom line. Of course, we'll keep covering this question. It's not going away anytime soon. We'll keep covering this technology with privacy and security going forward. It's going to be a big issue for the future. Let's move on to our second segment then and talk about this other one that comes up. And this is more of a specifically Catholic question. In New York, where the virus is hitting the hardest in the U.S., they've recently given the go-ahead to have video conference weddings. These are civil weddings, so that you can have the justice of the peace or whatever conduct the wedding over Skype or Zoom or whatever. And so it kind of comes up to me, like the question came up to me, what would the Catholic Church say about that? Could there be a Catholic wedding via Skype or Zoom where the couple would obviously be together in the same room? I mean, if you're going to get married, you're going to be not social distancing, shall we say? But if the minister and the witnesses are in separate places, is that possible, Father Cory? Do you know?
No. I mean, let's put it simply. The sacraments cannot be done remotely, period.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, it really is. It's really that simple. Now, we can start talking about different cases of how the sacraments are done. For example, having, the wedding could only be the minister, the couple, and the two witnesses, and that's it.
Right.
And they're all spaced so far apart.
The witnesses could be in the back of the church. They don't even have to be anywhere near.
Everybody's got their 6 feet. The minister's up at the altar, and 6 feet away are the couple, and 6 feet away from everybody else is each witness. But sacraments have to be done in person. I mean, it's that simple.
This may be an obscure theological point. Aren't the couple the real ministers of the sacrament of marriage?
Yes.
So as long as they're in person, right?
Well, so I mean, this is where you get this is where you get into the real edge cases of, technically, there are 2 sacraments that can be done by any baptized Catholic.
Yeah.
Marriage and baptism.
Right.
But those should only be done in extreme circumstances. An example you hear of is in Japan, during feudal Japan, when the Christian church was persecuted. Once Westerners finally could come back to Japan, they found Christians who had been baptizing and marrying throughout all these years, but they never had any priests. So they couldn't have the Eucharist, they couldn't have confession, stuff like that.
Technically, I think you don't even have to be baptized to be able to baptize someone.
Correct.
You as long as you intend to do what the church intends. I think is what I remember from my sacraments class.
And you use the water in the Trinitarian formula.
Yes.
But it's interesting that you bring up that the couple is the ordinary ministers. You still need, the church comes together as community, and that's the problem. Community is hard to do on Zoom, even though most people think you can. Not that kind of community. If you've been live streaming masses now for the last 5 or 6 weeks, you know that it's a great way to be connected to your community and your priest in prayer. But you are sorely lacking in the reception of Eucharist. So I can't see where, I have to agree with Father Cory, I can't see where you could legitimately, do a wedding. Now, if people want to be married civilly and then have their marriages blessed when this is all said and done, fine. But I don't even know how that would work. But now, other than that, I don't even think that would work. We couldn't do that.
Here's a question I would have to think about. I would say that ultimately you absolutely have to have the minister, the priest or the deacon, and the couple.
Yep.
The witnesses, this is where I've got a little bit of question. Is there a situation where the witnesses wouldn't necessarily have to be in presence, but we would be watching it over webcam? Now, I think the answer to that is no. They still have to be there. So you have to have at least a minimum of 5 people in a room to do a wedding. But that being said, again, most of our churches are big enough where you can have the social distancing. You could have all that stuff. But, there's still some places like here where we're still able to do confessions, in-person confessions, and not even the drive-by confessions, but the actual in the church.
that.
I like
That's
drive-by better than
mystifying to
drive-through.
Yeah.
Drive-by is like, I want to confess my sins.
I know. I use that term on purpose.
I got to credit Greg Willits for that one, doing that on his podcast. But yes, that's the interesting thing is there are ways to adapt. The church is old enough that we've seen all the different ways of having to deal with these things. We've had plagues and other situations, and like you mentioned, Japan and the hidden Christians, where we've had to do these things. So it's not like there isn't history for this. Mm-hmm. The current wrinkle is the opportunity to have technology as part of it. But as you say, and I think as some others have said, that technology is not a substitute for presence, physical presence. But I think it would, maybe it's happened already, but I think dioceses need to share guidance with the people, priests at least, yes. but in general, but the people wouldn't be bad, for what is permissible, what is possible, and what isn't. And I think that would help some of it. This is why people are so desperate for this to get back to Mass, and why there's these movements for people there to have restrictions loosened.
And I think also people didn't expect it to go this long. I think we were all naive in the beginning, thinking that this would be a small window where we would have to endure this type of activity. Now, as everything's unfolding and we're seeing that the window's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, now we have to come up with, how are we going to keep doing this if we go back and then we have to go back home again, and then we go back for a while, and then we have to go back home again.
Wow.
We don't, we've got to start looking as a church as to how to do this and keep our people both evangelized and fed at the same time.
Well, I think there's a frustration too of it started and we hurried up and we put together what we could. I'm doing my live streams. I'm, my live stream masses. I'm still hearing confessions. We still keep our churches open here. But what do we do long term? And what new things can we do long term to reach out to people? And I think at least, in talking with both lay people and other priests here, at least in my diocese, there's a feeling like we're not doing anything else. We're not trying, would doing the parking lot masses where everybody sits in their car as the priest celebrates Mass in their presence, is that something we should be doing? There's not a lot of conversation around things like that. Or if there are, there's like, no, we have to stay with where we're at.
Right.
And if you look at some of the timelines that people are putting out there, yes, some states, including Montana, are starting to talk about loosening restrictions, not removing restrictions. Those headlines where they say these states want to get rid of restrictions, that's not what they're doing. Don't ignore that stuff. They're loosening restrictions. And right now, as we're talking, as we're doing the recording, the Montana governor is actually having a press conference on what they want to do. But it's like loosening restrictions. But we're still talking possibly months
or longer
before all restrictions are lifted. And it might even be the end of the year, because there is a concern about a bounce in cases where you have a second wave.
Exactly. As a faith formation director right now, I'm trying to figure out how to program the upcoming year and look at both having a program that is an in-person and an online component. I think if I try to do the in-person only, I'm going to be back to square one again when this happens again. I'm not even going to say, if it happens, when it happens, because if we look at the 1918 pandemic, it happened again. And pandemics are like that.
Yeah, it came back again. In fact, they're talking 15 to 18 months before we have a vaccine and herd immunity, which, so that we're basically to where we are with the regular flu, essentially. And I've been saying for a long time, like here in Massachusetts, we're probably going to be among the last to lift restrictions. And even then, and it's probably in June, even then, like I said, we're not going back to normal. We're not going back to the way things were in February, where they'll loosen restrictions, but we'll have restrictions in place. Masks in public is going to be a standard for a long time, that sort of thing. And so the question is what does the church do? So I think dioceses need to get on the ball and start talking about the technology that they can use to provide to parishes. Every parish has basically been on its own. Every priest is on his own trying to figure this out. Dioceses need to start figuring this out giving these packages to the parishes. Like, this is how you do it. This is, this is what I would be doing if I were still working in the office for new media at the Archdiocese of Boston, like I used to 10 years ago, is, this is how you do it. This is the equipment you need. These are the instructions to follow. And then coming up with, the different offices. This is how you do evangelization online. This is how what ways that you could do it. Not that you have to do it, but ways you could do it. This is the ways that you could do religious ed online, so on and so forth. That we, as a church, we got to get on this. We can't just leave it up to everybody to figure it on their own. We need to work together on this. And I think that's important.
This is something I'm going to have to take to heart, because I'll probably be the one that would be working with the diocese, because I hate to say it, I'm probably the most tech savvy priest, at least, but, working with them to kind of set this up and figure, okay, Bishop, we need to be thinking not a month or two, but a year of doing stuff like this. And how do we do that? And by the way, I want to throw in a pitch to all parishioners. If your parish has online giving, use it.
Do it.
Let's just do it that simple.
Use it.
And thanks we got, I sent a letter and an article to my parishioners, and they've been responding very generously. But, I think we need to get that out there, is your parish is not getting its normal source of income with the offertory. This is one online thing that a lot of parishes are set up for. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are.
In Boston, they set up a special, in fact, this is a lay-led initiative. It's a page on the diocesan website. You can, it's like a 90-day initiative, and it's like you can commit to $1 a day, $5 a day, $10 a day if you can, for 90 days to your parish. It's a straight through to your parish. It doesn't go through the diocese at all. It goes straight into your parish's bank account. But they need it. Yes, and every parish should do electronic offertory. Even if they don't, use your bank's electronic transfer of funds or whatever. Mail a check if you have to, but keep supporting your parish, because if you don't, it goes away, and that's bad.
And if you're really old school, they all still have a mailbox that's locked outside. Please use it.
Right, exactly. Support your parish if you can, because it's vital. As we're all in this bad situation, but your parish is particularly vulnerable at this time. That's a good point at which we can move to a couple of headlines. One of the things that's interesting, speaking of Google, is that Google owns Nest, and Nest, they have their Nest cameras, the Nest doorbell, and one of the selling points for Nest has been the quality of the video. They have a high quality, like 1080 or 4K or something. So some high level of quality, which is important when you have a security camera, because you got to be able to make out the face of the person that's ringing your doorbell or lurking around your house. Well, they are turning down the quality temporarily to conserve bandwidth, which is, we're all using more bandwidth than ever these days from home. We're all on Netflix and Amazon Prime and YouTube, spending our time and so on and so forth. So this is one of the ways that they're doing it. Now, it doesn't say how low the quality is going. So it could be, one of the things they say is the Nest Cam IQ, they say at its regular level uses about 400 gigs of data per month, which is a lot of data, frankly.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Wow.
Given that there are a lot of cable companies cap your bandwidth at 1 terabyte a month, like 400 gigs is 40% of that.
Yeah,
that seems like a lot. Well, they're cutting it down to you're going to be able to max out at medium high quality setting is what it says, which is 300 gigs. Frankly, I'd turn that down even more.
See, I would. My instinct would be that would be probably about like a 720p or somewhere in there, where it's still high quality. It's still, decent enough you can be able to get what you need, but it's not going to be, not be able to see every freckle of the guy's face as he's breaking into your house,
Exactly. I don't need 4K video of the UPS guy.
That's very true. But I'll tell you, all I've seen on my Ring video doorbell for the past 6 weeks has been people trying to get into other people's cars. I mean,
really?
In the middle of the night. Yeah, that's all I keep getting from my neighborhood and this big surrounding area is people trying to get in other people's cars. And I'm like, aren't you supposed to be inside? I mean, they don't even have a mask on. It's like, come on.
Right.
But no, I think anything that can help us with bandwidth right now. I was explaining to Dom before we started that we're going to have to, here at our house, we're going to have to turn up the bandwidth here because we have too many things trying and competing for time and power. So anything that can help is wonderful.
Well, living in a rural area, I mean, first of all, we don't really have a lot of options. We've got, our co-op or local telephone co-op is our only high-speed internet provider. And there's been days I think we've maxed out our connection to the rest of the internet. Because again, it's a small area, so we don't have a large pipe leaving town to get to the backbone provider. So, I mean, even if I did max up our internet connection, it probably isn't going to do any good because they're just maxed out in general.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So this is another one of those ongoing issues we're going to have to deal with. Other companies that are capping bandwidth, Sony is limiting game downloads to the PlayStation. Amazon and Netflix have both trying to limit video bandwidth. It's same with YouTube. So it's a whole, everyone's trying to do it. Too many people are watching Tiger King and they're sucking up all the bandwidth.
I haven't even seen that, so I must be the only person in the world who hasn't.
No,
you are.
You're not.
Good.
I haven't either, so.
I've seen it, much to my dismay, but that's a whole nother show on the SQPN network. We'll talk about that at some other place.
There you go.
Another headline, also related to Google. Google says that they're blocking 18 million hoax emails related to COVID-19 coronavirus every day. 18 million a day, which now that sounds like a lot. Google has, they say they block 100 million emails a day in general. So 18% of their spam, basically, of spam right now is related to that, which is not surprising. But, I mean, frankly.
Well, of course, it's kind of funny because Gmail, when it first came out, that was the big privacy concern, was that Google is reading your email through this automated thing that no human can actually look at. And then we got the spam filters and went, never mind.
Does anyone else remember what life was like before really good spam filters?
That's one thing you can say about Google is the Gmail spam filters are the industry standard still.
Yes.
And I want to take this time to thank Google for doing that. Now, if we could stop all of the robocalls in the world, I'd be really happy.
Well, Android, at least, I think iOS has it as well, where it'll mark it as spam. If a call is a reported spam number, it'll mark it as spam. So that helps. If
you have AT&T or Verizon, at least they have apps that you can download to your phone that will mark things as spam calls. But you can also, on the iPhone, and you maybe tell me if you can do this on Android, but on iPhone, there is a setting to silence unknown callers. So if they're not in your contacts, it won't ring through, which is great most of the time because most people I want to talk to are in my contacts. But there have been occasions where I'm getting an appliance delivery and they're going to call me with the window. Sure. You need to turn that off while you're waiting for the call.
Yeah, see, I think it's got that setting in Android. I don't use it, but Android I think it's built in by Google that it'll mark it as, it'll actually come up with, the red stop sign with the white exclamation mark if it's a spam caller. Yeah. So it'll just tell you right on there, this is junk.
T-Mobile is filtering with spam likely. So when I see that, it's like, I'm not answering it. But you would think that the call centers would all be 6 feet apart now too. So they really should stop.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No, they're just doing it from home like everybody else.
Yes, they're working from home like all of us. All right. So let's move on to our picks of the week. These are always fun to do. And so I want to, first, Joanne, why don't we go with you? What's your pick of the week this week?
Well, before we got into all this COVID-19 madness, I was picking up a couple of items and on sale, and I believe they're still on sale. One is the Hyperjuice wireless charge stand, because I was looking for a Qi charger. I said that correctly, right? Because it's like GIF and GIF.
Yes, it's Qi.
But it's Qi because and it. Thank God I got one because my husband and I are burning through our phones a lot now that we're both home working from them. And it's a great little charger. It goes flat as well as it will move, it will reposition itself so that you can have it standing up. I like that better at night, so that I can see if somebody's calling me on the phone. It also comes with a port so that you can put a USB-A in and have another device charge, but you can't do it at the same time. So if your phone's on there, it's not going to charge the other device. I got it for $39.99 through Hyper. They also have a version of it if you want to have a whole bunch of other ports. So if you want other, USB-A, USB-Cs, you can get that as well. With it, I got the wireless charge case for iPods for $10. Now, this basically is an egg to put your egg in. Okay. But what it does, what it does is it actually, the case itself is to be used with a Qi charger. And when you put it in, it connects to the port on the bottom. That's how it connects. And then you put it on the charger itself and it works just fine. So no need to go out and buy the next, year of iPods. I'm getting mine charged through that. So right now, like I said, the original charger that I got was $39.99 and the little egg is still $10, and that's from Hyper.
It was originally $50, so it's down to $10. That's a pretty good deal.
Nice.
Well, that's because Apple ended up, with the second generation. So now they're practically giving them away, but they're worth it if you can get them.
Yeah, I may have to hop on that myself. That's for sure. I may have to get one of those for myself. That's nice. Excellent. Father Cory, what's your pick this week?
So, like many people, I'm going through withdrawals because there's no sports and there's no auto racing and there's nothing like that at all. But there's a site that has come to the rescue. Jelly's Marble Runs is a YouTube channel that's been around for years, and he's done these really incredible marble tracks where he'll do like thousands of marbles at a time. Well, somehow he's gotten agreements with Formula One and Formula E. E is kind of like Formula One, but it's the electric racing, to run marble runs using kind of like their logos or something similar. So the Formula One is based off of Formula One, and he had an agreement to do it. And what he does is he builds these tracks
out of sand,
and he runs. What's that?
Out of sand.
No. He's done with sand and everything, but these are just like plastic and Lego tracks.
Oh, okay.
That he sets up. And he runs these marbles, and he does it where, each marble is part of a team, and there's two different members of the team, and all this kind of, they'll do qualifying where each marble runs the track and does a qualifying run. And then they do the actual race where there's like 16 marbles that run around this track, and commentator as if it's, they're actual people in cars racing and everything. And it's really, really fun.
That's awesome.
And what's been amazing is like they did this Marbula one, and like I said, and it's Marbula, Marbula instead of Formula. They had agreements, and they kind of put it in the comments where they have agreements to use logos that are like the Formula One, and structures like the Formula One structures. But it wasn't actually sponsored by Formula One. Well, just last week, they came out with Marbula E, which is actually sponsored and in conjunction with Formula E racing, including the team names. So like you've got a Mercedes marble, you've got a BMW marble, you've got the Virgin Atlantic or Virgin whatever marble. And then they've got the actual on-screen graphics, because it's the footage is edited into the video by the Formula E people. And the commentator is the commentator for Formula E.
Wow.
So it's awesome. Like an official thing, and it is so much fun to just sit and watch these stupid little marbles run around this track. And some of these tracks are rather ingenious. I mean, the work that he put into them and planning them out. And I think what as I understand what he's doing with the Marbula E is these are actually the marble versions of the actual tracks that they race on. So it's the actual shapes and everything of the tracks, just scaled up down for marbles instead of cars.
That's awesome.
And it is so much fun to watch.
I expect NFL this fall to be doing Madden NFL football broadcast instead of regular football. That's
exactly
where we're going with these things. Awesome. That is fun. We'll put a link to the YouTube channel for Jelly's Marble Runs in the show notes. So my pick is a blog post I wrote recently about a little home project I did. So everyone working from home, one of the things that you may be encountering is a necessity to go into another room, close the door, and not be disturbed. This is my standard problem because at podcasting, I need to be nobody coming in and knocking on the door of my home office and coming in while I'm recording. And for years, I've wanted an on-air light like you see radio stations, but they are ridiculously expensive, unusual, just crazy. And they have to be wired into the wall and all that sort of stuff. So what I've done is I've taken a Philips Hue bulb and programmed it with with my Mac using a couple of pieces of software, automation software, Keyboard, Maestro, and I actually hooked it to my mixer so that, long story short, when I turn my mixer on, it sends a signal through Keyboard Maestro software on my Mac that then tells the Hue bulb to turn on red. So when I'm working, the bulb is red, and then when I turn the mixer off, it turns it off. I can also control it using the standard HomeKit apps, and I also have a setting where I could put it to yellow, where I'm not recording but I'm working. So if it's important, you can knock, but the red means don't knock unless the house is on fire or you're dying. So I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the show notes to my blog post about that. If this sounds like something you might be interested in doing for yourself in some form. It was relatively inexpensive, especially if you already have any of the Philips Hue stuff or anything like that on hand. All right. I think that should do it. I do want to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology, including Miguel G., Krista Joy M., Laura F., Benjamin B., and Kathleen F. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of our discussion? If you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. You can comment on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. And you can find links to all the articles from our discussion and our picks of the week at our show notes at sqpn.com. And if you can, we'd really greatly appreciate it if you could go to Apple Podcasts, wherever you get our podcast from, and write a review. That really helps us get the show out to more folks. And if you could share the podcast with your friends. So right now, people are listening to podcasts more than ever, and they're looking for new things to listen to. And if you could share the podcast with them, especially if you think what we're providing is a service of good information about what's going on in technology, and especially related to the current situation, we would greatly appreciate it if you'd help us get out to more folks. So until next time, Joanne Mercier, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Technology.
Thanks, Dom. Stay safe, everyone.
And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Well, thank you.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.